How did you get to New York?
So I came to the US 4 years ago to complete my undergrad degree in story and concept development for animation in Savannah, Georgia. It was at a college called SCAD, the Savannah College of Art and Design. And after that, I decided to do my master's degree here at NYU and to continue in my art career endeavors. New York is the center of the art world, so that no doubt enforced my decision. And it's to hopefully plant the seeds down to work in the US, mainly New York, for the foreseeable future.
Where are you from?
I'm from the UK, Hong Kong before that. So
all of your childhood in Hong Kong, or what's the story in terms of you
I was born in Hong Kong, but I was given international schooling from the get-go. International schools in Hong Kong are basically schools that set you up for living in the West. So we had British schooling, and Hong Kong was a UK colony at one point. So at around 14, 15, I moved to the UK permanently to finish my schooling. Then I more or less worked there. I spent a year back in Hong Kong where I lived through bouts of homelessness here and there, and I got my stuff together, moved back to the UK permanently, and I was there since 2017 before I came to the US for undergrad.
Were you an artist the whole time from the time you were a kid? Was that always something in your purview?
I've always liked drawing, but I suppose like any kid does. So it's more, I was really into my doodling. I read Captain Underpants real young. And that sort of stoked the love for drawing funny images and prizing reactions out of people from things you draw and write. But I didn't take it too seriously as a craft beyond that. It was only when I was homeless, actually, that as you do, like naturally, you think about what it is you're doing on this sordid planet. Yeah. And I looked around and I thought, okay, maybe I could give this like drawing thing another crack. And I did all right with the first couple of images in a sketchbook, which gained me a decent following online, and that inspired me to do art for a living. And from then onwards, I took it seriously as a craft and learned about it, learned the technical skills and the art theory, and that's more or less what got me to where I am now.
I'd love to hear about your life in Hong Kong before you started really giving this a shot. I've never been there. I'd like to go at some point, but I'd love to hear about what you remember, what resonates, what matters in your life story about, especially the earlier years before you go to the UK in Hong Kong.
Yeah, it was a very cagey metropolitan environment, very anxiety inducing in that tall skyscrapers, people rushing from A to B, very stressful environment. And they had what I would term archetypal Asian cultural values of making sure kids got the right grades in school. At the time that I lived there, anyways, it wasn't very loose and open in terms of how you could express yourself. You couldn't just dress in fanciful ways. You can talk in fanciful ways. And so I always felt like I didn't quite belong there, especially being given Western schooling. There's a big like herd mentality amongst Asians, amongst themselves. So slight prejudice towards people who deemed to be acting not Asian enough. So I didn't quite belong there. And as with the global village, we're all raised on media anyways. That's the whole McDonald'sization of the whole world. You get, kids growing up watching Justin Bieber on their TV screens, but from far off regions down to the US. And besides that, it was a bizarre culture where like a good section of them were taught to basically be British citizens, and I was a part of that, and it was a huge schism, I think, living there. So strangely, and this is not an opinion unique to mine, but there are a lot of sort of British Asians like that preferred the move to the UK. I felt more at home in the UK for sure. It's an all right, I think, holiday destination. Like I know people go there to like take pictures of like the skyscrapers and the buildings and all that, but actually living there was quite a stressful affair. I don't know what it is like now, and I know since I've left, there's been several political protests.
Yeah,
and a big part of that also is not to. I don't know how political you want me to get here, but it was a strange little place that kind of has no equal in that it was a colony given from China to the UK. And so it kind of developed its own weird culture that wasn't entirely mainland China. It obviously wasn't the UK either. But then when it had to be given back to China in the late 90s, there's always been a massive cultural discourse on what it is we should retain then, now that it's China's again. Like what constitutes Hong Kong culture. And I think a lot of Hong Kongers have really been against the over indexing of Chinese culture since. Yeah.
You talked about the stereotypical Asian values and how common that was in Hong Kong. What were those, and how did you kind of know you did not quite fit in that place?
Yeah, it was. So this idea of like individual sovereignty that you get in the West, of everyone kind of being themselves and acting in their existential desires, the kind of archetypal Asian thing is to think in terms of the collective and kind of act in packs. So whilst I'm speaking on behalf of China here, but the word China in Mandarin translates literally to middle of earth. So when people talk about all the white supremacists in the US and stuff, like in China, a huge section of them literally think the center of the world, like just based on how those words are defined. And so there's a reason why many of them are taught not to bother learning another language. It's kind of like the thing that's thrown at Anglo-Americans and British people, that they see themselves as having like main character status on the globe. Like China's got a huge amount of that. Like going from Hong Kong to the UK, even like in my schools in the UK, I'd hang out mainly with British people, and Asians would really like not like me for that. They would see it as like kind of a betrayal. But they themselves would not hang out with anyone else. They would kind of stay in the Chinese pack. And so the lack of desire to mix with others, that is a big one, especially with the Chinese. Yeah.
Was it mostly when you went to the UK the potential of individualism that was the big cultural difference that you noticed in terms of the encouragement of people to kind of grow their own roots in their own way? What did you notice?
I just thought it was kind of taken as a given that you could live life the way you want to live it, and not really have to stick by a unit, if you will. It's not quite the same like cultural myth as it is in the US. And I say myth as in like Barthian myth. It's like a thing that is implicit in culture in the US, hence gun rights and this idea of the American dream and stuff. It's not quite that, but it was certainly a lot more individually oriented than Asia.
You mentioned this once or twice already, that I think it was when you went from the UK back to Hong Kong that you experienced homelessness.
Yes.
What happened? What's that story?
Well, so kind of on the same track as what we've been talking about. And this is the issue with growing up in a global village and being a global villager. That's just kind of raised barbarically on all sorts of influences beyond just your zip code. I think I got a little too Western for my parents' liking, and we without going into too much detail, we flat out fell out at one point, and so I was also going through a pretty dismal period of depression because my granddad, who raised me predominantly, he had died of cancer around that time, and I felt like, well, okay, what's the point trying hard anymore? Like if like the person you want to impress is not around anymore. So I kind of just jacked the year in from then onwards, and just lived in like parks and on the streets and hung around with people I shouldn't be hanging around with.
How long did that last?
About 6, 7, 8 months. Yeah.
So you literally had all of your possessions on your back in a suitcase. What were you doing?
I didn't have much on me. Yeah, but more or less, I had 1 or 2 places I could go to, but I couldn't stay there permanently. I knew people with like houses in far off regions, but they weren't particularly safe to go to either. A lot of drug users sniffing about the area. Did
you have any money?
I come in and out of it. I'd steal a lot of my food and clothes at the time.
I think you mentioned that this was right around the time you decided to really give art a real go. Is that right? And what happened there?
I think it just hit me one of those months towards the end. It was on the back of dealing with like police officers, just kind of physically abusing me when I was at the park because I forgot what they asked for. They must have asked for like an ID check or something, but I talked back in my first language, English, and this is the cultural thing, but they thought I was like taunting them by speaking in another language. So I got kind of beat up by these 3 police officers, and on the back of that, I was like, right, I got better do something else. This is like, this is pretty low. May as well give like a life where I set my best foot forth a crack and see how far that takes me. But I didn't know what I was good at or what I was going to do. I just remembered loving to draw as a child. So I thought, what if I like the next thing I draw is like just the best thing I could possibly draw? Like, what if I get all the details right and make this a piece worth looking at? Like, how good would that turn out, I suppose? And it turned out okay. I posted it online, and then I went for another one, and over time that built up a bit of momentum.
That sounds like an insane time. At that point, you had not done any formal schooling as it pertains to art. Is that right? Or I know you said as a kid you loved to draw, but at that point, had you had any formal education?
No, I did take like art for A levels, but that's not much training. That's just standard testing. I even at PE for GCSE for A levels is like it's like SATs for you guys where we get to pick a few subjects. So I did do kind of artsier things with my high school education, but mainly I was taught to use Photoshop and take pictures with a camera, and that in itself did actually set me up for the long run pretty good, like knowing how to do Photoshop, even though I work in traditional mediums predominantly. Knowing how to use software like that has enhanced what I'm able to do with traditional medium. So it cuts across my whole practice, taking reference photos and then editing them and then finding stock photos to add on top of that. And I really am at an advantage compared to artists of yesteryear. That, like, I remember that story of Da Vinci having to purchase a bird at the market just to catch a glimpse of it flying in front of them to know how it looked at that angle. So, yeah, I've also taken media studies A-level, which enforces a lot of my art theory knowledge. I've done a few public speaking gigs where I talk about media and art theory. So my overall practice has definitely been informed by all of that, like everything I've been through, like even all of the traveling and not feeling like I quite belong at anywhere, like in Hong Kong or in the UK, really. I say they accepted me better, but I could never really say I'm a fully fledged British person either. So this idea that I'm living on in somewhat of a fringe, marginal, liminal area, which I think, as it turns out, the more I do this, the longer my career carries on for. That's pretty common experience these days, especially post the internet. It is certainly a spectrum, but it is something that seemingly a lot of people can relate to. Walter Benjamin talked about it early on with the age of the mechanical reproduction of art, that with the invention of photography and video technology, ritualistic sides of aesthetics will slowly be moved out in favor of a kind of barbarism, and we'll lose aesthetic aura altogether. And these days, almost everything is a representation. It's hard to get at the thing in itself, to use Kantian terms. And yeah, I'm sure you relate as well, like growing up and gaining access to technology and the internet.
Yeah. What you said, you posted your first couple pieces online.
Yeah.
Where did you post them?
It was Facebook and Instagram. Yeah.
And did you got immediate feedback from your friends, or it expanded to an outside network that you didn't previously know?
Yeah. So it began with just friends, and that was pretty good, as is, getting feedback from them, being told I'm doing a good job there, because as far as I knew, I thought I was looked down on for what I was going through then. And felt like I didn't have any friends. So like people that knew me on those platforms commenting at all that meant a great deal. But then it expanded to a larger network than that, and it more or less culminated in a short film mini documentary being made on my experiences of being homeless. And that kind of went many viral. I'm not too proud of how I came off in that video, so I don't tell people about that too much these days. But that kick-started my art career, basically. It gave me a bit of traction online, and then I got into like galleries and shows from then onward.
What did you draw?
I draw... I still kind of do the same things, but I did like a surrealist portrait in graphite pencil, and all I had were simple graphite pencils back then in a sketchbook, and now I still do the same, but like with more expensive gear.
Those 6 to 9 months when you were living as you were, for people who listen to this who have never been through something like that, what has stayed with you? I mean, other than the difficulty, I'm sure, of just existing, what might someone not fully appreciate about going through months of your life without having the secure housing?
Yeah. Well, there's a quote from this gangster film, the title of which escapes me, but it goes something like, once you've lived through hell, every day with your head above water is a good day. And that kind of I try and hold on to, so to maintain a level of gratitude for what I get here. Because it's not like I didn't live a privileged life before that or after. So I like to think of it as I can appreciate having basic needs met and the simplicity of merely having a house. I tend not to moan about not traversing into the higher society expectations of things, but also at the same time I can keep a place tidy at the same time. So yeah, I think appreciation of like having basic needs met, like food, having a place to stay. And I think it's certainly given me a work ethic that I don't quite see in most artists, especially at art school in Savannah, Georgia. Because it's speaking of contradictions, like cultural contradictions and the age we live in, that's deoritized everything. Another one is just the fact that the higher arts are often enlisted to serve activists and cultural issues, especially as it relates to inequality and whatnot. But there's such a wealth gap in itself with that. And there's always been a self-selecting mechanism in the art world where it's built for people of a certain economic class, if you will. And it's always been like that, even since the 1960s with the whole conceptual art movement that aimed to deal with this precise issue. It's only gotten worse. The art world makes more money than the music industry and film industry like put together, I believe. That's like a shocking revelation for most to hear, because it's not in the pop culture at all. It's hardly even folk culture with the way the institutions are run. And so having been homeless, I feel like when I was at art school, and even not to throw anyone under the bus, even working in exhibitions now, I feel like I tend not to complain about things quite as much. If the work's on the wall, I'm happy about it. If I'm told to, for work, draw storyboards or whatever, I don't find it an indignity that I'm not drawing exactly what I want all the time, always. I'm happy just to be able to do it.
Yeah.
Like one of the funniest things that an art student at Savannah said to me once was in regards to doing so much sketchbook work for class. She said, "What if I just grow sick of drawing and end up having to work in storybooks one day?" I'm like, well, you'd still... it's better you doing that than having to actually work at Starbucks from the get-go. At least you get to do that now. I'd rather be bored of doing art than working at Starbucks. Not to not to belittle that too much, but I think also why I try and focus on grassroots events as well with my art, galleries and shows. Whilst I do speak in a lot of art speak and read a lot of art theory, I try and make it so the art itself is something the masses can enjoy, as opposed to tailored purely for people who have come out of expensive liberal arts colleges and whatnot.
Yeah. I think you mentioned earlier that you were hanging out with people you probably shouldn't have been hanging out with in that era of your life. And it's not an uncommon story for people who get in a situation like that, especially protracted homelessness for months on end, to fall even further. Do you look back at that time and think that could have easily been you? Were you tempted by an even further downward spiral in getting addicted to drugs and doing whatever it is that people in that community often do that further destroys their life?
Without the art, certainly. Yeah. If
Really?
It didn't start picking up some steam, it really has kind of put my whole life together, that getting good, because it then gave me a reason to do anything else, really. I would say live a pretty fulfilling life. I go to the gym a lot, I exercise a lot, I try and eat healthy, I try and prolong it as much as possible so that I can enjoy more time on Earth, and that's given me a reason to even think about health. Whereas back then, I was in such a dismal position that might have been the last roll of the dice even.
Did you get to know a lot of other people who were experiencing pretty chronic homelessness? I'd love to hear about individuals or stories that have stayed with you from that time, from other people you met.
Yeah, there were certainly people around me that I looked at the time, and I thought, however low I sink, I can never get to that. And I mean in terms of drug abuse, and hard drugs, like Class A drugs. And it was a fair few people where it wasn't them alone that they were dragging down. So I knew, for example, this couple, boyfriend and a girlfriend pairing, that were in meth heads, and I lived with them a little bit. They had a tiny government housing situation that I squatted at from time or two, and it became apparent to me that she didn't fancy getting on the drugs at all. It was more or less him forcing it upon her, and just staying there and hanging out with them felt a bit unethical if I wasn't helping her get out of that. There was a lot of situations like that where you could tell people were almost dragging each other down, and I just figured I had to get out of there fast by the end, because it was with it being at such a different kind of life, you end up developing like just new standards for how to see things. Like I remember that particular guy, the meth head, he just really basic things were played off as achievements. So like the fact that he got a job interview at all, and again, like, good on him, but I didn't feel like I'd be able to get anywhere being around that. And a lot of false dawns were people like that too. Like, you try and help them, and maybe they get themselves going for a few weeks, and then they fall back, and then it does teach you to harden your heart a little, because you leave yourself open to being hurt by offering to help, and you know full well it's a dead end almost. It's like they say on the planes, you have to help yourself before you help others sometimes, and it's not to say, you know, swat people away and shut yourself off, but you're better off helping yourself first so you can help more people in the long run, especially when some people, as it currently stands with what you're able to do, the sink funds almost, without another way of putting it. Yeah, so there was a lot of people there where I just knew the conversations would go one way. Me trying to help them out of that would go one way. And it's often talked about now, this idea of the lonely chapter in a lot of men's lives.
For sure.
And I feel it's a developmental stage, right, as it's been described. And there comes a point in time where you just have to go it alone. Yeah.
The image I always like, or I always think of in moments like that, is akin to how people are encouraged to approach people who are drowning. That lifeguards who jump in the water and approach someone who are drowning are told to approach them with their feet first. Yeah. So that the worst thing that can happen is that person just grabs you and brings you under, and both people drown. That you have to approach them more gently with an assurance that if necessary, you can get out too. And I'm curious if this whole experience, how it's informed your view of, if at all, how society should approach people at the bottom rung of society who have fallen that far. How do you think about that? Approaching people who are experiencing chronic homelessness or massive drug addiction or meth addiction or all of those things?
Well, I guess the issue with that, as with, I think, most things with like an economic dimension to it, is that it's a two-pronged issue. You have how you're supposed to treat people on an interpersonal level for your self-esteem and self-congruency's sake. But then there's also the wider societal issue of why there are so many people who are homeless, and those are separate things. I think you could go about your day without being rude to people, but not going out of your way to help everyone you come across, and still be, believing that there should be social services and institutions in place to help with that. And I think often that line gets blurred a bit, because the fact of the matter is, even if society's not set up fairly, one still has to try pretty hard to make it for themselves. So the work ethic is still important. These kind of classical values that you're supposed to develop growing up and in maturation, they still ought to be seen as the maxims to encourage in people.
The virtues.
Yeah.
What would those be to you?
I think hard work, passion, focus, and on the whole, trying not to make excuses, which people hear things like that, and then there's cries of venture capitalism or whatever. And my point, as with earlier, is that those things need not be conflated.
So you have this escape hatch where a lot of people you must have known during that period of time may still be living in parks, and I mean, very well maybe dead by this point. You apply to grad school. What's the journey for you out of there? Yeah,
so I moved to I moved to Leeds with my newfound portfolio. I started an art and design course there, but I found it wasn't quite for me. But luckily, I was then able to work a few graphic design jobs in London, and I was working for startups mainly. I worked for about 4 of them at once. I was working pretty hard at the time, but I was just happy to be doing something related to the arts. I was art director at a few of those companies. So I was doing a lot of stuff like that for there was a fashion magazine, there was a modeling agency, there was a cryptocurrency trading platform, and I was just doing visuals and graphics for those companies. Then that documentary I told you about, what came out, and I gained a bit of traction, and from then onward, I quit all them jobs and worked as an artist for about 4 years in the UK, and it was going pretty good. Then COVID happened, and the galleries all shut down. I decided then that now was the time to go back into uni and maybe make the move to the US, where eventually I see myself in New York. Yeah.
You said you were an artist for 4 years before COVID. Yep. Are these people commissioning you? They're reaching out to you because of your internet presence and asking for art? How did you survive?
Yeah, I sold a lot of prints online. I won loads of award money at art shows. I was just selling pieces and doing commissions, and
You said earlier, and I had never really thought about this until you mentioned, but it's so true that high art is really something for not even the 1%, it's the 0.1% or fewer, because of how fucking expensive this stuff often is. Was that generally your clientele, or
no? I was more. It was more like it's nowhere near that. That's what I was working with is at best a tertiary market as compared to like the Tate Modern or something.
So people who would see your artwork, had found your artwork online and really liked it, and then wanted a piece.
Yeah, well, I guess. Yeah, well, the online. Well, the thing with the arts is, it's so, I guess, outside of who actually makes money, the cultural conversation about art has always been a bit hierarchized in the sense that you get, if you wanted to be an architect, you'd have to have receipts to show you've actually built buildings, you've designed things. If you're a lawyer, even more so, like you'd have to pass the bar.
Proof of work.
Anyone can say they're an artist. Yeah. And anyone can say they're a fan of art. Like anyone can be a commentator on it without even like any literacy in what it means to talk about art and the history behind it. And this is not to sound like a pointy head about it. But yeah, so there's always been a huge vernacular art market, and you see that on like online all the time. Tumblr artists, Instagram artists that like just draw pictures. They didn't really get any formal training. They're very good at doing it. And then you get fans of their work that are just fans of either them or just the idea of like pretty drawings, and that is for better or worse, that's the vernacular art scene, and you know, years and years, conceptual artists included, and the Academy of yesteryear. There's always been an attempt at separating high and low art to the extent that even low art's not art at all to some people, and so I try and bridge the gap between those two, because what's going on in contemporary galleries today might purport to be done for the proletariat or the working classes or whatever, but it's it's got to be a spit in the face in the working class to see bananas taped on the wall being sold for God knows how much. So, one of my ultimate, I guess, ideals or goals in life is to give people outside of the traditional art world circuit a taste of why it is things like that are being talked about. Even the way I draw, I think it was a bit is aesthetically is seen as a bit of a taboo. Realism, naturalism, representing things at all. It's that Bible quote about Exodus 24. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven images. Like there's a huge distaste towards kitsch representation and theatricality. There are all sorts of words that are effectively used as slurs for it, and that's something kind of I think people outside of that sphere don't understand. And we walk into the gallery and we see Duchamps and really caustic pieces that are deliberately antagonistic towards the senses, and I don't get it, and that's sort of the point. There's a the lot of art trends like that today that have lost that has driven a wedge directly between art and the masses, let's say. And
so for those 4 years, generally speaking, what kind of art are you making? Whatever people are asking for? Or were you developing a sweet spot, an expertise in a certain medium?
I would always like doing my fine art stuff, like so my surreal portraits. I always brand myself as that's what I feel speaks to me the most. But I would do all sorts. I've done tattoo designs, I've done family portraits, pet portraits. I would do kind of whatever I'd get hired for within limits, like morally, of course, and since then I've even expanded into, as I've said, like visual development for film and animation. So I've also done stuff that has more of a contract based salary to it.
Yeah.
Of course, with I've done storyboards for films and TV and concept art, and I in the this is another, I guess, vernacularizing of the arts, but I'm happy to use art skills in service of something a bit more decipherable is not the right word, but
something more noble.
I'd say things that like I could tell my parents about, and they'd understand what it is.
Yeah. Comprehensible, maybe.
Yeah.
Discernible, something like that.
Yeah.
So you, during those 4 years before COVID, are you feeling comfortable that you have gotten to a point just fine? I mean, to go from living in parks to being able to live on commissioned work, this must have been an incredible development for you. It almost seemed like you were living a different life altogether.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I certainly felt like that for days on end, them years. But it is such a bougie industry to be in that there has been a development going the other way, and that I mentioned earlier, the need for a gratitude practice. Being in the arts, it's immensely rewarding, and there's nothing else I'd rather be doing. When you sketch out like the Maslow's pyramid and higher Maslowian desires being met, and if we see that as a narrative over the course of a lifetime of man desires basic needs met, and then higher identity actualization values, you can so say that the kids in school that come flying out of the gates saying, I want to be an artist in life. Well, that's kind of like everyone. Like the whole point is you grow up and then you get to, you build yourself such a platform that you get to be a child again. And so that's in a sense why everyone wants to be this vague idea of the artist. Yeah. And so with that, it brings a lot of spoiledness. Yeah, for sure. Getting to do things for purely self-expressive purposes. There was that existentialist notion of the point of life is to do everything like you're doing it like an artist, which is to add your dash of stylization or take on things, and that's true free will, right? Like deciding what to do about an object, and the aesthetic component is the higher side of all of that. It's only when basic needs are met that a culture can even afford aesthetes at all. So yeah, I think I've gone the opposite route, and why I've been trying so hard, and even doing more public speaking things, and working on my art theory side of things, so I could do more public speaking. Is I believe those values that I learned through my times being homeless, the important ones that need to be heard now in the art world, for sure. And I just hope I don't forget what I learned.
Because, as you said, it is often a community of people, some of the most privileged people in the world. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, enough's been said about what's happened to the art market these days, and it is like such a circle jerk of like the top 1%. And you know, the problem with a decline in classical art skills, and not that was ever foolproof, but with the decline of that and the overly subjectivizing of art theory and what constitutes good art, is it does not have the democratizing effect as planned. It doesn't just mean that anyone, irrespective of the economic status, can be an artist. It just means the rich can be artists more easily, because now they don't even have to demonstrate art skills. That's why you get like people like Damien Hirst and Jeff Koons, who the latter of whom is who's literally, he started out as a broker and he saw a gap in the art market now with what can be afforded as art. So he could come in and just kind of take over with his ready-mades and stuff like that. And I know that's like a well-worn conversation gambit, but it's quite nauseating what's been allowed to happen. And I'm not to say we're to return to traditionalism and how we used to do things before the camera was invented, but that was at least something of a safeguard against precisely the current barbarism happening, where it's purely about how rich you are and how many connections you've got, like who's got like the richest friends, who knows the most Russian oligarchs. And like Damien Hirst has like people he could just ring up to bid on his works every time he puts something out, and even throughout history that's always been true. Like artists have only been as famous as the most renowned author, right? Like Andy Warhol had his had Greenberg, and Henry James made several artists famous. So it's still true. But I think us as artists, we'd go a long way if we maintained certain standards now.
What is it about surrealism that has spoken to you? Now, I know I've seen some of your work, man. It's fucking incredible. But
thank you.
What about it is, I don't know, do you identify with or has spoken to you so deeply?
Well, I think I kind of what was written about with surrealism is that it was an art movement that was most, I guess, acutely inspired by psychoanalysis and paranoid soul searching, if you will. And without reading all that theory, I've always thought of the imagery as that it's kind of route one delving into primordial fears. And I've always thought that surrealism in the style of like Dali and Kahlo, that it's like such a brilliant aesthetic of speaking to ideas that can't be breached with mere naturalism, without necessarily going into the totally abstractified sphere of like a Rothko. And I think, aesthetically, that the human animal is built to like see faces and give things voices in prosopopeia, and surrealism that is able to scratch that itch as a form of art. And I'm not to say I would do it forever, but it's been the most effective form of communicating the ideas I want to get across so far. And it's so, and I don't want to get in trouble for saying this part too loud, but it means the art is something that people can just look at and enjoy, even if they don't understand what it's talking about per se. Not that there are even prime encoded reasons in everything. So I think in a way that's more democratizing than anything.
I would love to talk about the role of New York in your journey. Obviously you're here now, but have you known for many years that this was your hopeful eventual destination? I'd love to just hear you talk about why it is that you're here now and what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I think it was, I think the short answer is yes. Yeah, I always felt like I would have ended up hereabouts anyways. It is the center of the art world. It's where the limelight is. And I feel like, because I believe in what I have to show the world and what I have to say to the world through what I have to show, I think I would have to end up here eventually. that would be what a life well lived, actually trying, as we were talking about earlier with regards to tall poppy syndrome and how certain places are built for people who are actually trying in life and others are not so much. And I think whatever your most ambitious thing is something you should always go for, more or less, because I'm of the belief that it's that old sort of Judeo-Christian idea, and it need not be something mystical, but it's the idea that you get away with nothing. And I think the psyche is very much like that. I think now with the internet and interconnected society, this everyone's having midlife crises a lot earlier than they would have done, because they're constantly being influenced by imagery of people to compare themselves to and where they stand in life. And that, sadly, I don't think is something we can break out of. That's the co-creation of the collective psyche of what the world looks like to you. And once it's there, you can't really escape it. Like we talked about how in the South, perhaps, there are people that live such a different life to this kind of hustle and bustle in New York. And maybe 20 years ago, they could have gotten away with just like turning their ears off, especially younger people, and just saying, I'll just stay where I am. I'll live a humble life and be happy with myself. And that's all. That would have worked at one point. And I'm speaking practically with living a happy life here. But now, once it's in and you just do that, you're no doubt going to wonder, what if I had done it? And it could well be a lot of people, this is a classic thing you see in films and stuff, like people leave where they come from, they try and go for the thing, and they realize it wasn't for them. But you actually have to like do it first. Yeah. That is a infinitely better regret to have than not chasing your dreams. Like Stereophonics had an album called "You've Got to Go There to Come Back," and this is going there. I think.
For people that don't know that much about the art scene here, what is it about New York that makes it clearly the center of the art world? Is it just the number of galleries, the number of opportunities to meet other artists? Like, in its totality, what about New York is this, beacon for you?
Well, what Wikipedia would be able to tell you, I guess, is it's been the cultural capital of the world, changing hands from Paris in the 60s, or maybe even earlier, when abstract expressionists who came out of New York started dominating the art world. And then it was followed by New York conceptualists, conceptual artists, and then the performance artists. So at the higher end of things, New York's been dominating through, as you said, the galleries. But I think, to go back to the vernacularity of it, this is just also where people come to chase their dreams, not just in the arts. And so implicit in that is people want to look at art, people want to go to galleries and put on art shows, even if they're not necessarily competing with the Tate Modern itself or something. There's a wonderful culture of just getting up and doing things. And yeah, that is that's much more of a riveting affair than staying where I was. And I'm not so sure I want to stay here forever, but I certainly want to do well enough that I have a reason to come back work-wise.
We were talking earlier about how, and correct me if I'm misinterpreting what you had said, but that New York, you could almost feel in moving here the encouragement and acceptance of people who are really going for whatever their thing is. How did you learn that? Was that just clear in the personalities you were meeting, in the comments people made? You just sort of felt the energy? How would you describe that?
Well, I've had some fairly bad experiences in the South. So in class, even at, it was at an art school that I was going to, there was a lot of that tall poppy syndrome. And
what do you mean by that?
So people who would try and do well, they get cut down for it, for convenience's sake, I suppose. Like, I guess trying hard, like knowing that someone's trying hard and going for it and not really coughing over their bits is it kind of puts everyone else out of place just by their sheer existence, because it means if they make it, you have no excuse if they're sat sideways to you and able to do the same thing. And so there's always been an element of groupthink in that. That's especially bad at an art college, I think, because if you think about how, as I said, like everyone wants to be an artist anyways, and with the vagaries of the vagueness of the term, makes it so everyone can desire that. I think a lot of the art students, they come from a place where they were the sole artist they knew. They were the art kid in school, and all of a sudden we're thrown together in one room and everyone's the art kid. And so like to still stand out was a daunting task. But I've had some pretty bad experiences with that. For example, this one time in class, just raising my hands, answering a question, and I got told indirectly by someone in class that my usage of big words was making them uncomfortable, that it makes them feel like they're stupid and they can't talk, and that to be more inclusive we should all use smaller words. So they raised their hand and said that, and like kind of everyone turned to me, like, because it was clearly like something about me. And but the biggest word I'd said in that exchange was, I don't know, tendency or something. So, and again, I don't want to sound so dismissive of it, because the education system here is often setting people up for a fall later. And like my girlfriend is a primary school teacher, and she tells me all the time like these stories that just say to me that kids are not taught to really feel passion for learning, like the rigors of intellect. And so every word just felt like a big word, and everything that I tried to do that was seen as trying harder than the rest, that got shut down quick. And that was a school where a lot of the most popular kids, they were not the ones that were the best in the class. It was almost like it was a negative economy in terms of that.
How would you contrast that to what you have thus far experienced here?
Based on again, I've no statistics to back this up, but like based on the eye test within my purview, I've not had to suffer the consequences of being myself quite the same as that. Like the small words brigade story I just told you about, like that has yet to happen. And I think, New Yorkers, because of it being such a cultural melting pot, they just seem more accustomed to quote unquote weirdos. like in the South, like there was hardly an Asian person at all, let alone someone that sounded like me. So like they almost kind of didn't know what to do with me. Like they found it such a struggle at times to like understand what I was on about, which has definitely altered my accent, the elongating of the vowels that comes with trying to be better understood. I've not had to do so much of that since coming here, and that I think scales out to what you tell people you do in your line of work. And
you said something earlier about how the documentary, correct me if I'm wrong about this, but that really was, given the attention it got, a major turning point in just the attention you were getting as an artist. And you said something earlier about how you felt like you didn't come off very well. What did you mean by that? I don't know if there's a regret there, but
I guess at the time that was all that was my story up until that point. But me being younger then, the homelessness was a much bigger chunk of my life then than it is now. And again, having done less in my career, so the homelessness became the thing that was just talked about throughout the documentary.
It's a huge part of your identity. Is how it was being framed.
And then it kind of dogged me a little bit in my public identity to follow, and things I would talk about in other interviews. It became made that thing, and I wanted to make sure the art was actually good first, before just that. And the longer I get away from that, the deeper I get into the trenches of the art world, which is so bougie, as we said. It does make me cringe sometimes that to still be known as someone like that, because like my life now is like night and day compared to how it was then. And I guess I'm not so sure it is reflective of what I am today, and I'm not sure it's necessary viewing anymore.
Yeah, I know. You're in school now. Are you also still commissioning work individually? Do you feel like your life is in a fairly stable and comfortable spot, or not particularly?
Yeah. I mean, I was doing well in the UK, but it's hard to purely make a living off of the arts, as anyone would tell you. So the point of going to grad school is to just heighten my credibility and skill set, so I can write about media with the qualifications for publications, and do the public speaking stuff with more accreditation, which then can fund my art career. That will help fund it a little more. So I'm operating with like pretty long-term goals in place, which is a good place to be in. It isn't the short grasping desire just for survival as it was back then. So I'm certainly in a much better place than I was.
I always like to close by getting guests' view and thoughts on how they think about success. You have an incredible fucking story, first of all, but the arc of your life, and I think you're totally right that it's probably impossible for people who haven't experienced what you have to have probably the gratitude you do for the basics in life being there. And if we were to talk in a year or a couple of years, how do you think about what it would mean for you to have a successful career, a successful life? It seems almost ridiculous to phrase it that way, given where you have come from. You talked about the Maslow's pyramid earlier. You have ascended that rapidly, it seems like. But I'd be curious how you think about that for yourself now, in general, as you think long term for yourself, or even in the next few years. What does success mean to you?
I think if I were to still be doing what I'm doing now, I'd be pretty satisfied with that. I think it's more about just the type 2 fun side of things. Like, what headspace was I in doing it still? And I think imposter syndrome, gaining confidence on doing what you're doing. I'd like to get into the flow of things and feel confident in doing it. Because I'm happy doing what I'm doing. You asked if I'm still making money off of it. As an international student, I can't quite do that. I'd have to, like, there's certain things I can do, but I can't like just work directly. So this has come with a lot of thinking about what I can do in the future in mind, and so I'd hope to find legal status in the US and work properly in the US here, and and just keep showing people what I can do.
Amazing story. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on, man.